Picture standing on Oregon's Mount Hood, certain your experience on the trails has prepared you for anything, until a sudden whiteout erases the sky, the slope vanishes beneath you, and one wrong move sends you tumbling down an icy face. In March 2013, 23-year-old hiker Mary Grimm set out alone for what she thought was a straightforward climb. Within hours, she was injured, lost on the mountain's remote western side, and forced into a 6-day fight to stay alive. Mount Hood, Oregon's highest peak at 11,239 feet, draws nearly 10,000 climbers a year, with its easy access and postcard-perfect silhouette. But despite its inviting appearance, the mountain hides real danger. Active fumaroles, hidden crevasses, sudden rockfall, avalanches, and rapidly shifting weather that can turn a clear day into a zero-visibility storm in minutes. March is especially treacherous. Winter clings to the slopes, spring fights to break through, and even experienced mountaineers can be caught off guard. Mary Grimm was no stranger to challenge. In 2010, she hiked the entire 2,653-mile Pacific Crest Trail from Mexico to Canada, a journey that taught her self-reliance, mental endurance, and how to read the wilderness. But while the PCT gave her confidence, it did not give her technical mountaineering skills. She'd never climbed steep winter slopes or used an ice axe in true alpine conditions. That confidence would soon lead her into a situation she could never have imagined. Mount Hood had captivated her for years. 3 seasons in a row, she tried to plan a climb, but something always fell apart. Friends canceled, storms appeared, and once even a professional guide refused to lead the group after noticing signs of worsening weather. Every failed attempt only deepened her obsession. She visited the mountain frequently, studying routes and imagining herself on the summit. Hood seemed to mock her, clear and glorious on days she wasn't climbing, hidden and brooding when she was. By March 2013, her patience snapped. After yet another canceled group trip, she made a choice experienced climbers would consider reckless. She would go alone. After all, hadn't the Pacific Crest Trail taught her to push through adversity on her own? Her confidence, flirting with arrogance, silenced any whisper of caution. She believed that sheer determination would carry her through, just as it always had. On the evening of March 23rd, she packed her gear meticulously, unaware that she was preparing for a 6-day fight for her life. She could not yet imagine how quickly a dream could blur into a nightmare, thin as an ice axe blade. The morning of March 24th, 2013, dawned calm. Mary arrived at Timberline Lodge, the 6,000-foot starting point for most Hood climbs. The parking lot was nearly deserted. Experienced mountaineers set off long before sunrise to avoid afternoon storms. But Mary didn't question it. Her gear, however, would have alarmed any instructor. She wore running leggings with shorts, a light jacket, and basic trail runners. Clothing suitable for a spring jog, not a winter ascent. In her worn pack, she carried only the barest essentials: a simple ice axe, a flimsy plastic poncho, a few Nutri-Grain bars, some Keebler crackers, and a handful of chia seeds. No warm sleeping bag, no tent, no extra insulation. She had no emergency beacon, no GPS, and she hadn't told a single person her planned route, a mistake that would later cost her dearly. The first hours went easily enough. She climbed the southern route, enjoying the view. But above 7,000 feet, the weather began to turn. Dark clouds gathered, and the wind sharpened. Still, she pressed on. She had waited too long for this chance. She wouldn't turn around because of a bit of bad weather. That choice marked the first step in a chain of mistakes that would transform her long-awaited ascent into a nightmare. Around 9,000 feet, the mountain struck. The sky closed in, clouds dropping so low they swallowed everything. The mild breeze became a punishing gale. Within minutes, Mary was trapped in what mountaineers call a whiteout, when sky and snow fuse into a seamless sheet of white and all landmarks disappear. Visibility collapsed. The wind roared so fiercely that every step became a battle. Snow lashed her face. Cold seeped through her thin clothing. She was caught in a classic alpine storm, the kind climbers fear most. Here, on a steep slope coated with hard ice, she finally grasped the gravity of her situation. Her gloves, soaked through, offered little warmth. She kept swapping hands between her pockets and her ice axe, her only lifeline on the icy incline, even though it kept skidding on the slick surface. At one point, through the swirling white blur, Mary spotted something that made her stomach drop. A dark, jagged outline broke through the haze, an ice-coated cliff rising in front of her like a solid, unscalable fortress. Even with ideal gear and perfect weather, this section demanded technical skill. In the storm, now consuming the mountain, attempting to continue would be nothing short of suicide. For the first time since she'd set out that morning, real fear gripped her. She turned to retreat, hoping to retrace her steps down the mountain, but inside this blinding storm, the task was nearly impossible. Her compass spun uselessly. She couldn't distinguish south from north, slope from sky. The familiar terrain had transformed into a featureless white void, where up and down seemed interchangeable. Every uncertain step might guide her towards safety or drop her into an unseen danger. Exhaustion and cold gnawed at her. Her hands could barely hold the ice axe, and her soaked clothing felt like it was draining the last scraps of heat from her body. Knowing she needed to lose altitude fast, Mary made a desperate choice. She decided to descend using a controlled glissade. Under normal circumstances, it was a standard technique. Sit down, slide, and brake with the ice axe. But with no visibility, it became a gamble with death. She realized almost instantly she had made a terrible mistake. In the swirling darkness, she hadn't seen that the mild slope she'd expected dropped sharply into a much steeper pitch. Her ice axe, her only brake, scraped helplessly across the rock-hard surface, unable to catch. Then a violent gust of wind slammed into her. She lost all control. Mary tumbled, rolling blindly down the slope, accelerating terrifyingly. The world became a chaotic blur of white and impact. All she could do was tuck her arms against her chest and brace for the blows, praying none of them would end her life. After roughly 40 feet of freefall, she smashed into ice and trees, bouncing to a stop at last. Her first coherent thought was a stunned, "I'm alive." Relief lasted only seconds before pain surged through her leg. She was lying in pitch-black darkness on the western side of Mount Hood, far from where she'd intended to be, injured, freezing, and alone. The nightmare was now real, and it was only the beginning. She forced herself to check her body. Her arms moved, her hands responded, but her left leg throbbed with sharp, pulsing pain. When she aimed her headlamp at it, she saw a long, deep gash running across her thigh. The cold dulled the pain, but she knew it was temporary. Numbness was as dangerous as the injury itself. Night was closing in, and her wet clothing was stiffening into icy armor as the temperature plummeted. Her first instinct was to pull out her phone, but, as expected, there was no signal. It hardly mattered. No one even knew she was on the mountain. Remaining still meant certain death. She had to move. But every attempt to stand sent her collapsing back into the snow, her right leg twisted beneath her, too weak to support her weight. After several agonizing tries, she accepted she couldn't walk. Crawling was her only option. Leaning on her ice axe, gripping at rocks, ice, and anything within reach, she began inching down slope. Her headlamp cast eerie shadows on the terrain around her. Cliffs, crevasses, broken ice fields, an entire labyrinth of hazards. She understood now that she had ended up on the remote western flank of the mountain, a world away from the gentler, more traveled southern route. Every push forward risked another fall. Every minute she lingered brought her closer to freezing. Around midnight, the reality became undeniable. She needed shelter. Her soaked clothes were freezing solid, and she was shaking so violently she struggled to keep hold of her axe. After searching in the storm, she found a shallow recess beneath a rock outcrop where the wind eased slightly. She pulled out her flimsy plastic poncho and did her best to create a barrier against the weather. That first night was a brutal test of willpower. Temperatures plunged far below freezing. Her lightweight running gear might as well have been paper. She knew that if she allowed herself to fall asleep, she might never wake up. So she forced her limbs to keep moving, swinging her arms, rubbing her legs, attempting tiny exercises just to keep her blood flowing. When dawn finally arrived, the pale light revealed the full extent of her predicament. She was trapped in a maze of cliffs, glaciers, and steep ravines. Timberline Lodge and her intended descent route were somewhere far beyond the mountain's ridgeline, invisible and unreachable. Ahead lay another day of hardship, and she had even less strength to face it. The following days blurred into a continuous battle for survival. Each morning she woke with the same thought: I have to move. But move where? Shrouded in fog that drifted in and out, she couldn't find a safe direction. She knew she remained on the west side, but the terrain was so steep and the snow so deep that progress came inches at a time. By the third day, her food was nearly gone. Only empty wrappers remained from the cereal bars and crackers. Her final reserve was a small handful of chia seeds, which she saved for absolute necessity. Hunger hurt, but thirst was far worse. She quickly learned the hard lesson that eating snow only worsened hypothermia. The only way to drink was to melt it. She filled her single plastic bottle with snow and held it against her chest, breathing on it slowly. It took nearly an hour of steady exhalations to warm the snow into just a few mouthfuls of water. During brief moments of sunshine, she left the bottle on dark rocks to catch whatever warmth she could. But most of the time, she melted snow using only her own breath. By evening, when she was utterly exhausted, even this small task felt nearly impossible. Her lips grew numb and raw against the cold plastic. Eventually, she found a partially protected spot beneath another rock ledge. Using her ice axe like a primitive shovel, she carved out a shallow cave in the hard snow. The labor drained what little energy she had left, but she knew the shelter might save her life. When finished, it was barely big enough for her to curl up inside. She spread her thin poncho over the ground and used part of it as a roof to shield herself from falling snow. Her backpack became a windbreak at the entrance. Inside her tiny snow cave, the temperature was only slightly warmer than the brutal cold outside, and even that small comfort was fragile. The freezing air seeped in through every crack. At night, Mary curled into a tight ball, knees pulled to her chest, clinging to every shred of warmth. Every few hours she was forced to crawl out and clear drifting snow from the entrance, terrified she might nod off and never wake again. Her wet clothing stiffened into an icy crust against her skin, and her toes, encased in soaked sneakers, were losing all feeling. Frostbite was beginning its slow, merciless work. By the fourth day, her strength was nearly gone. Crawling through deep snow drained her energy in minutes. Whenever the fog thinned, she could make out forested slopes far below, so close they seemed almost reachable, yet impossibly distant. Descending to them might offer shelter, but it would also take her far from any chance of being spotted by rescuers, if anyone was even looking for her. As the sun dipped behind the horizon that evening, Mary could no longer ignore the truth. She slid her phone from the inner pocket of her jacket, where she'd kept it tucked against her body to preserve the last flicker of battery. There was still no signal, but the camera worked. With trembling fingers numb from the cold, she hit record. The fading sunlight illuminated her face, revealing the exhaustion, the fear, and the heartbreak etched into her features. "Mom, Dad," her voice faltered. She paused, trying to gather her thoughts. "I didn't want it to end like this. I'm sorry for being stubborn, for not listening, for coming alone." Each word was a struggle, partly because of the cold, partly because she could feel emotion tightening her throat. She told them she loved them, thanked them for everything, asked them not to blame themselves. Tears spilled down her cheeks, freezing almost instantly. When the recording ended, she sat in silence, staring at the last thin strip of daylight. For the first time since her fall, she allowed the thought she'd been pushing away since the storm began. I might not make it off this mountain. Instead of panic, a strange peacefulness settled over her, an understanding of how precious every remaining moment had become. The night after she made the video was the worst yet. Her body had reached the edge of collapse. The cold felt as if it had seeped into her bones. She slipped in and out of a half-dreaming state where hallucinations mingled with reality, seeing rescue lights, hearing voices, only to wake each time to darkness and unbroken snow. By dawn of the fifth day, Mary's body was nearly spent. Her food had been gone for days, and she no longer had the strength to melt snow effectively. Her muscles seized in uncontrollable spasms from the cold. In rare moments of clarity, she understood the grim truth. If no one found her within the next day, she would not survive. By the sixth day, Mary was drifting in and out of consciousness. Her mind blurred reality with dreams. Sometimes she imagined she was safe at home, warm in her bed, and all of this was just a nightmare. But the mountain wind returned her to the truth again and again. Nature seemed determined to test her limits. Small avalanches began sliding down the slopes, some skimming dangerously close to her makeshift shelter. Snow repeatedly blocked the cave entrance, and each time she dug her way out, she used up precious strength she no longer had. Each time she stepped outside, she risked being swept away. Her last handful of chia seeds had vanished the previous day. Now her only food was snow melted in her mouth in small, deliberate sips. Hunger no longer clawed at her stomach. Instead, there was only hollow emptiness and a strange sense of lightness spreading through her limbs. What had once been a haven, her snow cave, now felt like a burial chamber. The walls collapsed more often, forcing her to rebuild them constantly. The poncho covering her became stiff as armor. Sleep, whenever it tempted her, felt like surrender. In a sudden flash of lucidity, Mary recognized the danger. Avalanches were increasing. She had to move. Summoning the last scraps of her strength, she crawled along the slope, searching for a safer spot. Every movement was agony. Her right leg was nearly frozen and immobile. and her injured left leg throbbed with every push. Plowing through deep snow, she suddenly plunged chest deep into a hidden pocket. Struggling only made her sink further. Panic flooded her. Dying trapped in a snow pit was too horrifying to accept. Then, through the haze, a calm inner voice broke through. Her father's voice. Just breathe. She forced herself to stop, inhale slowly, and examine her situation. Bit by bit, she packed down the snow around her, creating rough steps. It took nearly an hour, but she finally freed herself. As darkness fell again, she discovered a small rock ledge that offered slight protection from the wind. It wasn't ideal, but searching for anything better was impossible. As she worked weakly to form a new shelter, she prayed for the first time in days, though not for rescue. She prayed for her family, that they would be able to bear whatever happened next. Something inside her broke that night, but with the despair came an eerie acceptance, a quiet resignation to whatever might follow. Meanwhile, the world she'd left behind had not stayed still. Her unusual silence during spring break finally alarmed her friends. On Thursday, March 28th, her friend Izzy, unable to shake a growing sense of dread, called Mary's mother, Shelley. That single call set off a chain reaction. When her family realized Mary had been missing since Monday and had skipped multiple plans, her father Bruce remembered something she had said about Mount Hood. She had promised never to attempt it alone, but a parent's intuition told him exactly where to search. They immediately contacted authorities. By Saturday morning, March 30th, a massive search and rescue operation was underway at the base of Mount Hood. The Clackamas County Sheriff's Office deployed every available resource. Portland Mountain Rescue, the region's elite team, sent its most experienced climbers. The Hood River Crag Rats, the oldest mountain rescue group in the United States, joined the effort. Mountain Wave Emergency Communications set up a mobile command center to coordinate the search. The first breakthrough came quickly. Mary's car, sitting alone in the Timberline Lodge parking lot. Inside were receipts and small items confirming she had indeed planned to climb. Mary's parents felt their hearts collapse. Their worst fear was now certain. She had gone up the mountain, alone, 6 days earlier. The rescuers faced a monumental challenge. They knew she had begun on the southern route, but in 6 days of storms, she could be anywhere on the vast mountain. Every minute mattered. The teams knew that after such a long period exposed to the elements, the chance of finding someone alive was small. But the weather offered a rare gift that morning. Clear skies, excellent visibility. Around 10 a.m., the Oregon National Guard's Black Hawk helicopter lifted into the air for a preliminary sweep before the full-scale search began, slowly scanning the mountainside. Mary awoke in her makeshift shelter with an unfamiliar feeling, a sense of peace she hadn't known since the storm began. Something in the air had shifted. For the first time in days, sunlight filtered across the slope, warming the crusted snow with its gentle rays. She crawled out from beneath the rocky ledge and began trying to melt snow in her water bottle. That was when she heard it, the faint, rhythmic thumping of helicopter blades. At first, she thought it was another cruel hallucination, just one more trick of her exhausted mind. But the sound grew louder, steadier, real. Summoning every last reserve of strength, she waved her arms, screamed, did anything she could to be seen. Then, out of the blue sky, the helicopter appeared, its dark outline sharp against the bright morning. The crew spotted her, a tiny figure on an endless white slope near the Sandy Glacier, roughly 4,600 feet in elevation, far west and below the standard climbing route. A National Guard Black Hawk hovered overhead, its rotors whipping snow into a violent storm around her. Mary shielded her eyes as a rescue medic descended on a long cable, the line swaying in the wind. Despite the turbulence, the helicopter held almost perfectly still, a testament to the crew's skill. The medic touched down on a ridge about 50 feet above her and began trudging toward her through the deep snow, never taking his eyes off her. "Are you Mary?" he shouted over the roar of the propellers. She managed a nod. Tears instantly froze on her cheeks. It was the first human face she had seen in 6 days. "We need to move to the pickup point," he yelled, gesturing to a spot where a rescue line with a hoisting device had been secured. It was only about 30 feet away, diagonally uphill, a distance that meant little under normal circumstances, but to Mary, battered and weak, it felt as long as the entire mountain. She began crawling toward it, inch by inch, clinging to every lump and ridge in the snow. The medic stayed close, ready to grab her if she slipped, but unable to carry her through the deep drifts. This final stretch felt as hard as everything she had endured, and yet, for the first time in days, there was a tangible goal in front of her. At last she reached the device. The medic swiftly fastened her into the rescue harness, signaled the helicopter, and the line began to lift them off the mountain. The slope dropped away beneath her as the helicopter rose, Mount Hood's jagged ridges shrinking into the distance. The very place that had held her captive for nearly a week. Inside the aircraft, medics wrapped her in layers of warm blankets and started administering emergency care. The Black Hawk headed toward Portland, where a medical team waited at Legacy Emanuel Medical Center. During the flight, the rescuers exchanged astonished looks. After 6 days in brutal conditions, Mary was still conscious and responsive. She was severely dehydrated, frostbitten, exhausted, and suffering from a serious leg injury. But she was alive, coherent, and fighting. At the hospital, her parents were waiting. Seeing their faces, her mother's tears, her father's trembling relief, brought a surge of emotion that swept over her like a breaking wave. "I'm sorry for making you worry," she whispered through tears. Doctors quickly assessed her injuries: a deep laceration on her thigh requiring surgery, frostbite on her feet, and extreme dehydration. The fact she hadn't succumbed to hypothermia amazed them. "I hope I can still run barefoot," she joked weakly as they examined her toes. Her ability to find humor after such an ordeal left the medical staff speechless. The next day, Mary gave a short interview from her hospital bed. "I have a purpose in life," she said quietly, "and now I know it for certain." Her eyes held a kind of clarity that can only come from staring death in the face and returning. 2 weeks in the hospital passed in a blur, while doctors treated her injuries and worked to save her frostbitten feet. During that time, Mary learned to cherish the simplest things: the warmth of blankets, the taste of clean water, the feeling of lying safely in a bed. Each day brought more strength, but also a deeper awareness of how close she had come to losing everything. Her story didn't end on the slopes of Mount Hood. It began there. Recovery was long. Physical therapy helped her regain movement in her injured leg. Specialized treatment healed her frostbitten toes. But the most profound healing took place in her heart. The mountain had humbled her. It had stripped away the illusion that determination alone could conquer anything. "Mountains teach humility," she said in an interview months later. "They show us how small we really are. But they also reveal what we're capable of surviving." While still recovering, Mary began speaking more and more about her desire to become a Bible translator and work among remote communities. The ordeal on Mount Hood only cemented her calling.
When you come that close to dying, she explained, you understand what truly matters. It's not about pushing boundaries or collecting achievements. It's about helping others. It's about meaning. By 2022, Mary had fulfilled that calling. She was living and working in Papua New Guinea with Wycliffe Bible translators, dedicating her life to service, far removed from the ambitions that once drove her up the icy slopes of Mount Hood. Yet whenever she looked across the mountainous terrain of her new home, she remembered those 6 desperate days. They had taught her to value every breath, every sunrise, every moment. Thanks for watching Mary's unbelievable survival story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories of courage and resilience. See you in the next video.